Big old bag of beans. Yo, sassy. We are almost ready. Hello, hello. I am using your wax burner. It is delightful. I have some cinnamon vanilla burning. I'm reluctant to burn your stuff because I don't want it to go away. Oh shit, these wax melts actually melt. I shouldn't have been surprised by that, but I was. They become like liquid. I don't usually burn them, I just hoard them and sniff them. But I got from Etsy this like vanilla cinnamon thing that I was expecting to be a lot better than it was, so it's just like, fuck it, maybe I should just melt it. And it did smell quite better when it was melted, but like, it turned into water. I'm not gonna drink it. I know it's not water. I'm not quite that thick in the head. Alright, we're gonna wait just a little bit longer because I know that you were not the only one looking forward to this. As far as I know, it could have been that you were and people were blowing smoke up my ass, which wouldn't be a first. Do not drink candle wax. Yeah, no. I do not have the desire to, No, that's not the kind of libations I tend to go for. Especially candle wax that didn't smell good in the plastic. I have higher standards. Probably. Very much probably. But yes, how are you doing? It's good to see you. We are starting off with Stave 3. We are doing Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. If you want to see the complete version, the first 2 staves, the VOD of that should be up. It's called Christmas Eve Spooks. This is 2021. I don't know how far you're digging back into the VODs, but for those of you who are going on a deep fucking dive there, I'm not gonna question why you do the things you do with your life, but if you're watching this in a VOD in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, congratulations. Festivities went better than you expected. Fuck yeah, dude! Nice for things going better than expected. Always good. Things that go good are good. Yeah, I was thinking about you today. I was thinking about you. I was thinking about really all the mods. I just hope y'all are doing okay. Review requests queue. The fuck is this? Oh. Yeah. Okay, fine. I forgot to actually charge you guys for your bird facts. You know, you would think that would happen automatically, but no. There have been no unban requests, which is fantastic. I feel like everyone kind of knows that that's futile. So yes, things are as they should be. Now I gotta remember the voices. I know I had Scrooge some like southerner like this. And I think that was the only constant voice that I had. I know I had Kermit as the nephew. And I knew Ghost of Christmas Past was stereotypical Ghost, but I think we're done with him. I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for that meddling Twitch, right? Shite. So I remember Scrooge's voice, which is good. I know that Mr. Oh my god. Marley? I think his name was Marley. Or Marlet? One of the two. He was supposed to be Italian. Supposed to in huge quotes. Fuck. And I think those are the only... I know that his old girlfriend was like British, and then her new man was also British. A terrible Italian accent at best. Oh, dude, I don't know what it was, but it was desperate. That probably is the single worst accent I've ever tried to do on stream. And I am so sorry. I don't know how to, like... I felt myself wandering from, like, Russian into Transylvanian into just desperate squeaky voice. And I realized, oh gods, I don't really know how to do this. Like, the closest I get is, like, the New York accent that you hear Rat talking in a lot. And I was just like, wow, I don't know how to do this. And I just do. It was all I could do to save myself. Because it was just like trying to get through a Super Mario level and dying incessantly. Both inside and outside. Blew his house with a blue little window and a bad accent. But yeah, we will be having more good and not so good accents as we continue. I've been live for a minute now. I've been live for like 10. So I think we're good to get started. And for those who want to see it from the beginning, check the VOD. Yeah. What is this? Oh, there's 7 other live channels. Oh, I don't care about that while I'm streaming. Oh, I guess normal people do raids and shit, so they would care. I'm a terrible streamer. It's just fucking... Nobody should be surprised. Alright. Stave 3. The second. Oh, right, and the narrator was Irish. The second of the 3 spirits. Awaken in the middle of a oh my lord. 4 words in and we can't talk already. That's a record. Awakened in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in the bed to get his thoughts together. Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell again was on the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time. For the especial purpose of holding conference with the second messenger dispatched him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But, finding he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains this new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed. For he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and didn't want to be taken by surprise and made it nervous. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being unusually equal to the time of day, express a wide range of their capacity for adventure by observing that they are good at for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes no doubt there lies a tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing, for Scrooge quite heartily as this, I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange experiences, and nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. No, being prepared for almost anything, he was not one by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck one, and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time, he lay on his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light, and I took a breath and forgot how to read. What? He lay on his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon him when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant, or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be at the very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you and I would have thought at first, for it is always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done about it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of the ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room, there's no doubt about it, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were hung with a living green, and it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened, crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back at the light, as if so many mirrors had been scattered there. And such a mighty breeze went roaring up the chimney, as that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many, many a winter season gone. Heaped on the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of pears. Nope. The fuck? Barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch. That made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to say, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge, as it came peeping round the corner. Alright, what ghost voice do I give this dude? Alright. I've given you plenty of time to think about it. What voice am I giving Ghost of Christmas Present? Do 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 you do da 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 da. And no, we're not doing Italian. Something from Hotline Miami. Oh, fuck. Can it be from Hotline Miami 1 or 2? Can it be both of them, or does it have to be from the original? Because the only voice I can remember from the original, the two, are the, "Hey, dude!" No, sorry, oh my god, that was terrible. "Hey, dude! You're my friend after all." And the chicken's voice of just like, "You fucked up. Yes." Best Phoenix Wright impression. Or that too. Oh, this could be fun. Okay. Zerp. Zerp. Have me do the chicken from Hotline Miami for Ghost of Christmas Future. And I will do my best to do Phoenix Wright for Ghost of Christmas Present. I feel like that's the best way to solve it, because... Also, hi Zerp, because those two options are so fucking good, both of them, that I'm split down the middle, and I have to do both. So, Zerp, remind me, do the chicken from Hotline Miami for Ghost of Christmas Future. This is very, very important. Don't fuck this up. You got this? Alright. Now to do Phoenix Wright. Chicken from Hotline Miami Future. Yes, you got it. Alright. Can you hear this? That's not very satisfying. I need a desk slam sound. That's better. Alright. Come in! Exclaimed the ghost. Come in and know me better, man. Oh, this is gonna be fucking fun. Objection! Yes. Alright. Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. He's not the dogged Scrooge he had been. Though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet him. I am the ghost of Christmas Present, said the spirit. Look upon me. Ding! Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe, or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capricious breast was bare, save for a red tie, much like a lawyer, a defense lawyer at that. Never mind. As if the disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, and spiky black hair, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanour, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. What have I done? Something beautiful. You've never seen me like this before, exclaimed the spirit. Never. Oh God, that was awful. Never, Scrooge made to answer it. Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years? Pursued the phantom. I don't think I have, said Scrooge. I'm afraid I've not. Have you had many brothers, spirit? More than 800, said the ghost. A tremendous family to provide for, muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas Present rose. Spirit! Oh, fuck. Wrong voice. Spirit, said Scrooge submissively. Conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you would ought to teach me, let me profit by it. Touch my robe! Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkey, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pigs, sausages, oysters, pies, pudding, fruits, and punch all vanished instantly. Thank fuck that list wasn't any longer. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of the night they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where, for the weather was severe, The people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music, in scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings, and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it plumping down into the road below, and splitting into artificial little snowstorms. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, and the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been ploughed up in the deep furrows by the heavy wheels of cartons and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels, hard to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire, and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad, and the clearest summer air and the bright summer sun might have endeavoured to diffuse in vain. For all the people who were shovelling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now then exchanging a facetious snowball, better-natured missile far from many a worldly jest, laughing heartily as if it went right and not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still half opened, and the fruiters raging in their glory. They were great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at doors and tumbling out into the streets in their apoplectic opulence. The ruddy brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like the Spanish friars, and winking from their shelves in wanton slyness at the girls as they went by, and dancing demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples, clustered high in blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes, apples clustered fucking what? There were bunches of grapes, made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from conspicuous hooks. The people's mouths might water with gratis as they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrant ancient walks among the woods, and pleasant shufflings ankle-deep through the withered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squat and swarthy, sitting off the yellow of the oranges and the lemons, and in the bright compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish, set forth among these choice fruits in a bowl, though members of a dull and stagnant-blooded race, appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish, when gasping round and round their little world in slow and passionate excitement. Okay, so that paragraph in and of itself furthers my conviction that Charlie Dickens was paid by the fucking word. Homeboy just spent 5 minutes talking about the fruits that are lined up in the grocery shops. Just putting that out there. Just saying. No shade, but that's exactly what just happened. You can't tell me otherwise. The grocers nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down or 1, but this was actually a college paper he had to submit the next day, right? I'm getting that vibe from the description of the fucking... Oh my god. The grocers. 500,000 word minimum. Yup. The grocers nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down or 1, but through those gaps such glimpses. 'Twas not alone that the scales descended on the counter made a merry sound, or the twine and roller parted company so briskly, or that the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, and even the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, that even the raisins were so plentiful and rare, the almonds so extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, and other spices so delicious, the candied fruit so caked and spotted with molten sugar, as to make the coldest lookers-on feel faint and subsequently bilious. Nor was it the figs that were moist and pulpy, or the French plums blushed in the modest tartness of their highly decorated boxes, or everything was so good to eat in its Christmas dress. But the customers were all so hurried and eager in the hopeful promise of the day that they tumbled up against each other at the door, crashing their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, and came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of the like mistakes in the best humour possible, while the grocer and his people were so frank and fresh that the polished tarts with which they fashioned on their aprons might have been one of their own, worn outside for general inspection, as for Christmas dolls to peck at if they chose. But soon the Staples called good people all to church and chapel and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. Not a single straight person in sight. At the same time there emerged from scores of by-lanes, by-streets, and nameless turnings innumerable people, carrying their dinners to the baker shops. The sight of these poor revellers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in the baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. And it was very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice there was angry words between some of the dinner carriers who jostled each other, and he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humour was restored directly, for they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day, and so it was. God love it, so it was. In time the bells ceased, and the bakers were shut up, and yet there was a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking, in the thawed blotch of wet above each baker's oven, where the pavement smoked as if the stones were cooking too.
"Is there a peculiar favour in what you sprinkle from your torch?"
asked Scrooge.
"There is. My own!" "Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?"
asked Scrooge.
"To any kindly given. To a poor one most." "Why to a poor one most?" asked Scrooge. "Because it needs it the most." "Objection!" "Spirit," said Scrooge after a moment's thought, "I wonder you, of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp up these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment." "I?" cried the spirit. "You would deprive them of their means of dining every seventh day, what the fuck, Wolfie? Often the only day on which they can be said to dine at all," said Scrooge. "Wouldn't you?" "I?" cried the spirit. "You seek to close these things on the seventh day," said Scrooge, "and it comes to the same thing." "I seek?" exclaimed the spirit. "Forgive me if I'm wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least that of your family," said Scrooge. "There are some upon this earth of yours," returned the spirit, "who lay claim to know us, and whose deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us, and all our kith and kin, as if they never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us." Ding! Scrooge promised that he would, and they went on, invisible, as they had been before, into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Scrooge had observed at the baker's, that notwithstanding his gigantic size he could accommodate himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully, like a supernatural creature, as it was possible he could have done in any lofty hall, including in front of a judge. And perhaps it was the pleasure of the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hearty nature, and his sympathy with all poor men, that led him straight to Scrooge's clerk's. There he went, and took Scrooge with him, holding his robe. In the threshold of the door the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. Think of that. Bob had but 15 bob awake himself, and pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name. get the ghost a Christmas present, breast his four-roomed house. Then up rose Miss Cratchit, Cratchit's wife, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence. And she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes, and getting the corners of his monstrous shirt collar, by Bob's private property conferred upon his son and heir in the honour of the day, into his mouth, rejoiced to find himself so gallantly attired, and yearned to show his linen in the fashionable parks. And now, two smaller Cratchits, a boy and a girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the ghost, and known it for their own, and basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion. The two Cratchits danced round the table and exhausted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies, while he, not proud, although his colours nearly choked him, blew with the fire until the slow potatoes bubbling up, knocking loudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled.
Oh God. Voice for Mrs. Cratchit. And the children Cratchits. Mrs. Oldbag from Ace Attorney. Ooh, hold on. I need to Google who that is. I'm drawing a blank. Miss Oldbag. Ace Attorney. Wendy Oldbag, talkative old woman. Oh, I know her. Okay. I know exactly who this is. Okay. Okay, I can do this. God, it's been so long since I've heard her. Alright, hopefully I do this justice. I'm going off of really rusty memories. What has ever gotten your precious father, then? Oh God, no, that's straight Southern. Hold on. Hold on. Loading, please wait. This is old back. Come on. What has ever got your precious father, then? Said Miss Cratchit. And your brother, Tiny Tim. And Martha wasn't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Alright, Wren wants to be the girl. Here's Martha, Mother, said a girl, appearing as she spoke. The boys, I'm just gonna... I have no idea. I guess I can make the boys surfer dudes. Here's Martha, Mother, cried the... Nope, they sound old. Oh well, cried the two young Cratchits. Hurrah! There's such a goose, Martha. Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her with officious zeal. We deal of work to finish up last night, replied the girl, and to clear away this morning, Mother. Well, never mind, so long as you are come, said Miss Cratchit. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm, Lord bless ye. No, there's Father coming. Fuck. No, there's Father coming, cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. Hide, Martha, hide. So Martha hid herself, and in came Bob the father, at least 3 feet, a comforter exclusive of the fridge. Of the fringe, rather, hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Tiny Tim? Do-do-do-do. Do. That's where that's from? Alas for Tiny Tim. He bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. Oh God. Voice for... What voice did I give Bob Cratchit? Oh, fuck, I don't remember. Alright, we're giving him a new voice. What voice do we give Bob Cratchit? And hold on. Hold that thought. I'm gonna listen to what Miss Oldbag sounds like, because I don't think I remembered correctly. Oh God, I hear myself. Oh God, how the fuck do you listen to me? Oh, I'm terrible. Okay. Oldbag. Ace. Oh, I can make her a lot more raspy and naggy. Okay, that's what I'll do. Rude? What? When did I insult you? Oh, I can make him rude. Oh God, how can you listen to me? Listen. Yeah, I don't have a defense. I plead guilty. I'm guilty. Didn't insult me, I'm insulted for you. Don't be, I deserve it. Oh God, what voice do I give Mr. Cratchit? Maybe I just make him sound like an old Japanese man. Yeah, sure. I'll take it. Fair.
Why, where's our Martha?
Cried Bob Cratchit, looking around.
Not coming,
Said Mrs. Cratchit.
Not coming?
Said Bob with a sudden said Bob with a sudden declension in his high spirits, for he had been Tim's blood horse all the way from church, and had come home rampant.
Not coming upon Christmas Day?
Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke, so she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while the two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim, and bore him off into the wash-house, that he might hear the puddin' singing in the copper.
And how did little Tim behave?
Asked Miss Cratchit, when she had heard Bob on his credulity, and Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content.
As good as gold,
said Bob.
and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day Who lame beggars walk and blind men see.
That voice is weird on the throat, but I'll take it. Bob's voice was tremulous when he told him this, and trembled more when he said Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim, before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Tom, turning up his cuffs, as if, poor fella, he was capable of making more shabby, compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and round, and put it on the hob to simmer, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose. And when they returned, in which they soon returned in high procession, such a bustle ensued that you might have thought that the goose, the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon, much like the treasured jungle chicken, to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth, it was something very like that in that house. Miss Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. Martha dusted the pot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner of the table. The two young Cratchits set terrors for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts, crammed spoons into their mouths lest they should shriek for the goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Miss Cratchit, looking slowly along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight rose around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly cried hurrah. There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour, the size and cheapness, were themes of universal admiration. Eked out of apple sauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family indeed, as Miss Cratchit said it was a great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish. They hadn't ate it all at last, yet every one had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to their brows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Miss Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough? Suppose it should break in turning out? Suppose someone should have gotten over the wall with backyard and stolen it, while they were merry with the goose? A supposition to which the two young Cratchits became livid. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Hello! A great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper. A smell like a washing day. That was the cloth. A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook next door to each other, with a laundress next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Miss Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quartern and light and brandy, and bedlight. What the fuck are these words? Half a quartern of ignited brandy, and bedight with Christmas holly stuck upon the top. Oh, what a wonderful pudding! He was so totally paid by the word. Bob Cratchit's.
Oh, what a wonderful pudding!
Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Not their kids. The pudding. Okay. Miss Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind, and she would confess that she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everyone had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to a hint at such a thing. At last the dinner was all done. At last indeed. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted, and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovel full of chestnuts upon the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew round the hearth, in what Bob Cratchit called a circle, meaning half of one, and Bob Cratchit's elbow stood by the oh my fucking god. Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass
of glass. Glass. It's not a hard word. Glass. 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, however as many golden goblets would have done, and Bob served it out with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and crackled noisily. Then Bob proposed.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
Which all the family re-echoed. Tiny Tim. God bless us to everyone, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit,
said Scrooge, with an interest he'd never felt before.
Tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat, replied the ghost, in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If the shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, no,
said Scrooge.
Oh no, kind spirit, say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race, returned the ghost, will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. The fuck, Phoenix, right? Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words. To hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief.
Man,
said the ghost,
if man you be in heart not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you've discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live and what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Oh, fuck. Scrooge didn't say any of that. 'Twas the ghost. Take 2.
Man, said the ghost, if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you've discovered what surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust. Rabble, 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 rabble.
Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily, on hearing his own name.
Mr. Scrooge,
said Bob.
I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed, cried Miss Cratchit, reddening. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear,
said Bob,
the children, Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, said she, on which one drinks the health of such odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling men as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear,
was Bob's mild answer.
Christmas Day me!
I'll drink to his health, for your sake and the day's.
She's southern again, said Mrs. Cratchit.
Not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
Oh my fuck. The children drank to the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings, which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank the last of it all, but he didn't care twopence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, and mere relief from Scrooge the Baleful being done with. Bob Cratchit told him how he had a situation in his eye for Master Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6 pence weekly. The 2 young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter's being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire between his collars, as if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favour when he came into the receipt of that bewildering income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice at a milliner's, told them what kind of work she had to do, and how many hours she'd worked at a stretch, and how she meant to lie abed tomorrow morning for a good long rest, tomorrow being a holiday she passed at home, and how she'd seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the lord was much about as tall as Peter, at which Peter pulled up his collar so high you couldn't have seen his head if you had been there. All this time the chestnuts and jug went round and round, and by they had a song about a lost child travelling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, sang it very well indeed, even though only the dogs and the deer could hear it. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed, their shoes were far from being waterproof, and their clothes were scanty, and Peter might have known, and very likely did, the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, they looked happier yet in the bright sparkling of the spirit's torch imparting. Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time it was getting dark, and the snowing pretty heavily, and Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets. The brightness of the roaring fires in the kitchens, parlours, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cosy dinner. Sorry, yawning intermission. With hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn to shut out the cold and darkness. There all the children of the house were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts, to be the first to greet them. Here again there were shadows on the window blind to guests assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted, and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbour's house, where woe upon the single man who saw them enter, artful witch as well they knew it, in a glow. But if you had judged from the numbers of people on the way to give friendly gatherings, you might have thought that nobody was home to give 'em welcome when they got there, instead of every house expecting company piling up its fires half chimney high. Blessings on it, how the ghost exulted, how it bared its breadth of breast, and opened its capacious palm, and floated on outpouring, with a generous hand that often slammed the desk and screamed objection, its bright and harmless mirth upon everything within its reach. The very lamplighter, who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with specks of light, and was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly at the spirit past, though little kenned the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas. And now, without the word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though the burial place of joyance, and the water spread itself wheresoever it listed, or would have done so but for the frost that held it prisoner, and nothing grew but moss and furze and coarse rank grass. Down in the west, the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant, like a sullen eye, and a frowning lower yet. was lost in the thick gloom of the darkest night.
What place is this?
Asked Scrooge. A place where miners live, who labor in the bowels of the earth, returned the spirit. But they know me. See! Hold it!
A light shone from the window of the hut, and swiftly they advanced toward it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled round a glowing fire. An old man and woman, with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy, and from time to time they all joined in the chorus. Surely as they raised their voices the old man got blithe and loud, and so surely they stopped. His vigour sank again. The spirit did not tarry there, but bade Scrooge to hold his robe, and passing on above the moor, sped. Whither? Not to sea. To sea? To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water, as it rolled and roared, and raged among the dreadful caverns it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth, as such was its bidding from the water cult, and the great holy spirit that was Auxie the ghost. Built upon dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or so from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed the wild year through, stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind, one might suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it. Like the waves they skimmed. But even here 2 men who watched the light had made a fire, and through the loophole in the thick stone wall shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea. Joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Christmas in their can of grog, and one of them, the elder too, with his face all damaged and scarred with the hard weather, as the figurehead of the old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Again the ghost sped on, above the black and haven sea, on until, being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the officers who had watched dark ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day of the year, as he shared to some extent in the festivities, and had remembered those he cared about at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him. 'Twas a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. 'Twas much greater a surprise to Scrooge to recognise it as his own nephew's, and to find it himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the spirit standing smiling by his side, and looking at the same nephew with approving affability.
Ha ha!
Laughed Scrooge's nephew.
Ha ha ha!
God, I don't know how to laugh as Kermit.
Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha!
I have no fucking clue. I tried. I'm sorry, chat. If you should happen by any unlikely chance to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. 'Cause clearly I need to see more people. It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment to things. While there is infection and disease and sorrow, there's nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humour. When Scrooge's nephew laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face into the most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece, by marriage, laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, not being a bit behindhand, roared out lustily,
Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it too.
God, I gotta do Miss Piggy now. Miss Piggy, Miss Piggy, Miss Piggy.
More shame for him, Fred.
No. Deeper.
More shame for him, Fred.
No. Throatier. Nope, that's just a straight trill.
More shame for...
Fuck. Oh, I'm hitting the limit. God damn it. Come on, Miss Piggy.
Oh, dear.
Maybe I'm closer than I think.
More shame for him, Fred,
said Scrooge's niece indignantly. Bless these women. They never do anything by halves. They're always in earnest. She was very pretty. Excessively pretty. With very pink skin and a curly tail. With dimpled, surprised-looking capital face, a ripe little mouth that seemed to be made to be kissed, and no doubt it was all kinds of good little dots about her chin that melted into one another when she laughed, and the sunniest pair of eyes you ever saw in any little creature's head. Although she was what you'd have called provoking, but satisfactory.
He's a comical old fellow,
said Scrooge's nephew.
that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred,
hinted Scrooge's niece.
At least you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear?
Said Scrooge's nephew.
His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking, ha ha ha, that he's ever going to benefit us with it.
I have no patience with him,
observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece, his sisters, and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion.
Oh, I have,
said Scrooge's nephew.
I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He didn't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner,
interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everyone else said the same, and they must have been allowed to have been competent judges, 'cause they just had dinner, and with the dessert upon the table, clustered round the fire by lamplight.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it,
said Scrooge's nephew,
because I haven't great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper?
Topper had clearly gotten his eye on one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, for he answered that a bachelor was a wretched outcast who had no right to express an opinion on the subject. Whereat Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump woman with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed.
Do go on, Fred.
Fuck.
Do go on, Fred,
said Scrooge's niece, clapping her hands.
He never finishes what he begins to say. He's such a ridiculous fellow.
Scrooge's nephew revelled in another laugh, and it was impossible to keep the infection off, though the plump sister tried hard to do it with aromatic vinegar. His example was unanimously followed.
I was only going to say, said Scrooge's nephew, that the consequence of his taking a disliking to us, and not making merry with us, is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but I can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there, in good temper, year after year, and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you?
It only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50. That's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his taking Scrooge, but being so thoroughly good-natured, and not much caring what they laughed at. So they laughed at any rate. He encouraged them in their merriment, and they passed the bottle joyously. After tea, they had some music. They were a musical family, and they knew that they were about when they sung a glee or a catch. I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like any good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead, or get red in the face over it. Scrooge Sneeze played well upon the harp, and played among other tunes as a simple little air, a mere nothing. He might learn to whistle it in 2 minutes, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past. When this strain of music sounded, all the things the ghost had showed him came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that he could have listened to it often years ago. He might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the sexton's spade that buried Jacob Marley. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and ever better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. Stop, there was the first a game of blindman's buff. Of course there was. And I no more believe that Topper was really blind than I believe he had eyes in his boots. My opinion is that a done thing between him and Scrooge's nephew, at the ghost of Christmas present knew it. The way he went after the plump sister and the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature, knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping up against the piano, smothering himself among the curtains. Wherever she went, there went he. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anyone else. If he'd fallen up against him, as some of them did, on purpose, he wouldn't have made the feint of endeavouring you to seize you, which would have been an affront to your understanding, and would have instantly sidled off in the direction of the plump sister. He often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not, but at last he caught her, when, in spite of all her silken rustlings, and her rapid flutterings past him, he got her in a corner whence there was no escape, and then his conduct was most execrable, for his pretending not to know her, his pretending that it was necessary to touch her headdress, and further to assure herself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger, and a certain chain around her neck, was vile, monstrous. No doubt she told him of her opinion of it, when, another blind man being in the office, they were very confidential together behind the curtains.
So is this sexual harassment, or are they flirting? I really can't tell with Dickens, and it bothers me more than it should. Anyway, Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind men buff party, but was made comfortable in a large chair on a footstool in a snug corner, where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her, when she joined the forfeits, and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise the game How, When, and Where she was very great, and to the secret joy of Scrooge's nephew, beat her sisters hollow. Though they were sharp girls too, as I could have told you. They might have had 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in his ears. In their ears. He sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed it quite right too, for the sharpest needle, best Whitechapel, warranted not to cut in the eye, was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be. That's a can of worms on par with the Baby It's Cold Outside song? Wait, are you referring to the Maroon 5 song? Like, baby, it's cold outside and I got nobody to love. Da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. Wait, what are the actual lyrics to that song? Baby, it's cold outside. Oh, fuck me. Wait, no, that's not what you mean. There's a Christmas song called that? I guess I just found it. Maybe it's bad out there, so what's in this drink? No cabs we had out there, I wish I knew. Rest like Starlight, not a break the spell. Ugh. Ah, you're very pushy, you know. I'd like to think of it as opportunistic. Ooh, God. This... Ooh. I simply must go. Baby, it's cold outside. The answer is no, but baby, it's cold outside. My maiden aunt's mind is vicious. Gosh, your lips are delicious. What the fuck? How can this be anything but harassment? If not straight coercion. It's gotta be really catchy for people to have a doubt about that then. Composed in 1944, Loser originally wrote Baby It's Cold Outside as a playful call and response duet for him and his wife to perform at their housewarming party while their guests were preparing to bid them good night. What the fuck is wrong with this person? Dude, I'd like to speak to your wife and make sure she's okay. Outside of this being 1944. Oh, that... A couple years ago, there was a big stink because they were saying the guy was forcing her to stay. I would say so from reading the lyrics. Oh, is anyone out there? Because it's getting harder and harder to breathe. Da-na-na-na. I should have known that. I grew up listening to that song. You're right. I forgot that there was... the first words in the chorus were, Baby, it's cold outside and I got nobody to love. And the rest of the song just disappeared in my head. When it gets cold outside, you got nobody. Yep. Oh, I knew that. I just completely forgot. Oh. Oh, man. Now I feel like I have to sing the whole song. I'll do that at the intermission after this long-ass chapter. We're still on the 3rd chapter out of 5. When it gets cold outside and you've got nobody to love. Do-do-do-do. I'm having too much fun. You guys let me have too much fun. Okay, let's get back to it. No, that song's gonna be stuck in my head now. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. But this, the spirit said, could not be done.
Here's a new game,
Said Scrooge.
1 half-hour, spirit, only one.
'Twas a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning, to which he was exposed, elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked the streets, and wasn't made a show of,
He wasn't led by anybody, and didn't live in a menagerie, and was never killed in a market. And it was not a horse or an ass or a cow or a bull or a tiger or a dog or a pig or a cat or a bear. At every fresh question was put to him, the nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, fallen into a similar state, cried out, "I have found it! I know what it is, Fred! I know what it is!"
What is it?
cried Fred.
It's your Uncle Scrooge.
She's only got 2 lines, so I just figured I'd give her whatever the fuck that weird thing was. Which it certainly was. Admiration being the universal sentiment, though some objected to the reply of his little bear, ought to have been yes, inasmuch as the answer in the negative was sufficient to have diverted their thoughts from Mr. Scrooge, supposing that it had any tendency that way.
He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure,
said Fred.
and it would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. Here's a glass of mulled wine ready for our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge.
Well, Uncle Scrooge, they cried.
A Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is,
said Scrooge's nephew.
He wouldn't take it from me, but maybe he'll have it, nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them in an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw, how far they went, many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. A spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail. In misery's every refuge, where a vain man in his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out. Left his blessing, and taught Scrooge his precepts. 'Twas a long night, if it were only a night, but Scrooge had his doubts of this, because Christmas holidays appeared to be condensed into the space of time that they passed together. 'Twas strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it, until left the children's 12th night party. Looking at the spirit, they stood together in an open place. He noticed his hair was grey.
Are spirits' lives so short?
Asked Scrooge. My life upon this globe is very brief, replied the ghost. It ends tonight. Hold it!
Tonight?
Cried Scrooge. Tonight, at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near. The chimes were ringing the 11:15 in the moment.
Forgive me if I'm not justified in what I ask,
said Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit's robe.
but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself, protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?
It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it, was the spirit's sorrowful reply. Look here. From the foldings of its robe, it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet, clung upon its outside garment. Oh, man! Look here! Look! Down here! Exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meagre, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out, it touched them with its freshest tints. Its tail and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them, and pulled them to shreds. Where angels might have sat, enthroned, devils lurked, and glared out menacingly. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade, though all the mysteries of the wonderful creation has monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge started back, appalled. Having shown to him in this way, he tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves. rather than be parties to such a lie of an enormous magnitude.
Spirit, are they yours?
Scrooge could say no more.
They are man's,
said the spirit, looking down upon them.
and they cling to me, appalling from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that which doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it!
Cried the spirit, stretching out his hands toward the city.
Slander those who tell it ye. Admit it for your factitious purposes, and make it worse, and abide the end. Have they no refuge or resource?
Cried Scrooge.
Are there no prisons?
Asked the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words.
Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked round him for the ghost and saw it not. At last the stroke ceased to vibrate, and he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley. And lifting up his eyes, behold, his soul found him, draped and hooded, coming, like a mist along the road, toward him. Stave 4. The last of the spirits, who is now to be voiced by the chicken of Hotline Miami. But first, I have a temptation to sing Harder to Breathe by Maroon 5. Will you, chat, indulge me so that I can finally get this wretched thing out of my head? It will only be a small intermission. Just a quick recalibration. Oh, Lord. Good Lord. It's already 9:30, and I have 2 more staves to go. I don't think I have time to sing. Oh, gods. Go for it, just don't get punched in the copyright. Oh no, I'm not. This is gonna be a cappella. I'm gonna look up the lyrics and just recite them. Harder and harder. Okay. I'll probably only do 1 verse of this because I don't think I can take myself seriously for more than that. How dare you say that my behavior's unacceptable? So condescending, unnecessarily oh my lord. Oh, it's the curse of the 4th word. How dare you say that my behavior's unacceptable? So condescending, unnecessarily critical. I got the tendency to get very physical. So watch your step, cause if I do, I'll need a miracle. You drain me dry and make me wonder why I'm even here. This double vision now we're seeing is finally clear. You wanna stay, but you know very well I want you gone. Not fit for fucking to the ground that I am walking on. When it gets cold outside and you got nobody to love. You'll understand what I mean when I say there's no way we're gonna give up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like a little girl cries in the face of a monster that lives in her dreams. Is there anyone out there? Cause it's getting harder and harder to breathe. Is there anyone out there? Cause it's getting harder and harder to breathe. And that's all I'm doing of that. Okay, we've wiped the curse away. We can now continue without Maroon 5. Thank you, gods. Oh. Alright. And now, back to our feature presentation. Dude, I don't think my singing is good enough to get nailed in the copyright, dog. Especially not now. By the time this ends, I'm gonna sound like a frog. Alright.
The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came, Scrooge bent down on his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved seemed to scatter gloom and misery. I have expected a Freudian slip of "baby, it's cold outside." Wait, it didn't say that! I've been thinking the wrong lyrics my entire life. I literally thought it was "baby, it's cold outside and I got nobody." It's when it gets cold outside. I am 25 years old. Oh my god, when did this song come out? Do I want to know? Harder to breathe. (2002). This song has been out for 20 years, and I haven't known the lyrics until tonight. And you know what the best part of this is? In 2 days, I'm gonna go "baby, it's cold outside" again. And I'm not gonna remember that it's not the lyrics. Fit to fucking tread the ground I'm walking on. Baby, it's cold outside and I mean, it works just as well. When it gets cold outside and you got nobody to love. Da-da-da-da, you understand what I mean when I say there's no way we're gonna get up. It's really not "baby, it's cold outside." I'm shooketh. Alright, anyway. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach the figure from the night, and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that the mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. And that was without gazing upon its chicken head. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come,
said Scrooge.
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me the shadows of the things that happened, but will happen in the time before us,
Scrooge pursued.
Is that so, spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, and as the spirit inclined its head, that was the only answer he received.
Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape, so much his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit pauses a moment, as observing his condition, and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there was a rooster head, and there was a ghostly eyes intensely fixed on him, while he, though he stretched out his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black.
Ghost of the future,
he exclaimed.
I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to be another man from what I was, I'm prepared for you to bear me company, and do with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on,
said Scrooge.
Lead on. The night is waning fast. It's precious time to me, spirit, I know. Lead on.
The phantom moved away as it had come toward him, Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them, and encompass them of its own act. But there they were in the heart of it, on change amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets, and conversed in groups, and looked at their watches, and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit
stopped beside one knot of a businessman. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. I know not much about it either way. I only know that he is dead.
When did he die? Inquired another.
Last night, I believe.
Why? What's the matter with him? Asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. I thought he'd never die.
God knows, said the first, with a yawn.
What has he done with his money?
Asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence. A pendulous. Excrescence? A pendulous pimple on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock.
I haven't heard, said the man with a large chin, yawning again. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know.
This pleasantry was received with a general laugh.
It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, said the same speaker, for upon my life I don't know of anyone to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer?
I don't mind. Oh. Fuck it. I'll give him the turkey voice too.
I don't mind going if lunch is provided,
observed the gentleman with the pimple on his nose.
But I must be fed if I make one.
Another laugh.
Well, I am the most disinterested among you all, said the first speaker, for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch, but I'll offer you to go if anyone else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away, and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men, and looked on toward the spirit for an explanation.
The phantom glided onto the street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking the explanation might lie here.
Sorry that I'm giving, the narration the voice of the chicken. I didn't realize the ghost of the future wouldn't fucking talk. Which is most annoying. You I will ban.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, good. Might lie here.
He knew these men, also, perfectly. They were men of high business, very wealthy, and of great importance. He made a point of always standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is.
Improvising, oh yeah.
Strictly in a business point of view,
How are you?
said one.
How are you?
Returned the other.
Well,
Said the first.
Old Scratch has gone his own at last, eh? So I'm told.
Returned the second.
Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose. No, something else to think of. Good morning.
Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach such importance to the conversations, apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was the past, and the ghost province was the future. Nor could he immediately think of anyone immediately connected with himself, whom which he could apply them, but nothing doubting that whomever they applied to had some light and moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared, for he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of the riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured into the porch. It gave him a little surprise, however, for he'd been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand, in a situation in reference to himself, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went to an obscure part of the town, where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. They were always foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, and the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their fences of smell, and dirt, and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth, and misery.
Oh my god, I need to stretch out my mouth. Okay, I'm good.
Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop below the penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor within were piles of heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in the mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting among the wares he dealt in by a charcoal stove made of old bricks was a grey-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself the cold air without by a frowsy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung up on a line, and smoked his pipe in the luxury of calm retirement.
Oh my god, this chicken voice is hard to do for paragraphs. But I am dedicated. I can do this.
Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. but she'd scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, all three burst into a laugh.
Water break for a moment? Oh, I already have. Let the charwoman be. Let the charwoman. Let the charwoman? Let the charwoman be alone to be the first,
cried she who had entered first.
Let the laundress alone be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it. You couldn't have met at a better place,
said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth.
Come into the parlour. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two aren't strangers. Stop till I shut the door this sharp. Ah, how it squeaks. There ain't such a beastly rush of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe. And I'm sure there's no old bones in here as mine. Ha ha! We're all suitable to our calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlour. Come into the parlour.
Whoa. The parlour was the space between the screen of racks. The old man raked the fire together with the old stair rod, having trimmed its smoky lamp, for it was night, and the stem of his pipe put in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on the stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance at the other two.
What odds then? What odds then, Miss Dilber?
Said the woman.
Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. That's true indeed,
said the laundress.
No man more so. Why then, don't stand staring as if you were afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose. No need, said Miss Dilber and the man together. We should hope not. Very well then, cried the woman. That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. If he wanted to keep them after he was dead, a wicked old screw, pursued the woman. Why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself. It's the truest word that was ever spoke,
said Miss Dilber.
It's a judgment on him. I wish it were a heavier judgment,
replied the woman.
And it should have been. He may have depended on it, and I'd have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bottle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor am I afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we're helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bottle, Joe.
But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and a man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A shield or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums she was disposed to give to each upon the wall, and added them into a total when he found there was no more to come.
That is your account, said Joe, and I wouldn't give it another 6 pence if I were to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?
Miss Dilber was next. Sheets and towels and little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner.
I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and the way I ruin myself,
said old Joe.
That's your account. If you asked me for another penny, made it an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown.
And now undo my bundle, Joe,
said the first woman.
Joe went down. Oh.
Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened many great knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
What do you call this?
Said Joe.
Bed curtains.
Ah, returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms.
Bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Said Joe.
Yes, I do,
replied the woman.
Why not? You're born to make your fortune,
said Joe.
And you'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe,
returned the woman coldly.
Don't drop the oil upon the blankets now. His blankets?
Asked Joe.
Who else do you think?
Replied the woman.
Isn't likely to take the cold without them, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?
Said old Joe, stopping his work and looking up.
Don't you be afraid of that,
returned the woman.
I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter around him for such things if he did. Ha! You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it, if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting of it?
Asked old Joe.
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure,
replied the woman with a laugh.
Somebody was a fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one.
Scrooge listened to the dialogue in horror, as they sat grouped upon their spoil, in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lap. He viewed them with detestation and disgust, which could hardly have been greater, though the demon's marketing of the corpse itself. Laughed the same woman, when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground.
This was the end of it, you see. He frightened away everyone. From him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Spirit,
said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot.
I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, though it was dumb, announced to itself in an awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around in it, obedient to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced toward the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger on Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but he had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. Oh, cold, cold, rigid death, set upon thy altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast at thy command, for this is thy dominion. But of the loved, the revered, and honoured head, thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purposes, nor make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy, and will fall down when released. It is not that the hearth and poles stood still, but that the hand was open, generous and true, the heart brave, warm, and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, Shadow, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound, to show the world with life immortal. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed. He thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealing, griping cares. They would have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in a dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child, to say he was kind to me in this or that, and for the memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think.
Spirit,
He said,
this is a fearful place, and leaving it I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go.
Still, the ghost pointed with an unmoving finger to the head.
I understand you,
Scrooge returned.
and I would do it if I could, but I've not the power, Spirit. I've not the power.
Again, it seemed to look upon him.
If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death,
Said Scrooge, quite agonized.
show that person to me, Spirit. I beseech you.
The spirit spread its long robe for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where Mother and her children were. She was expecting someone with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked from the window, glanced at the clock, tried in vain to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At last, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door, met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight, of which he felt ashamed, and he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been boarding him by the fire, when she asked me faintly what the news, which was not until after a long silence he appeared, embarrassed how to answer.
Is it good
She said,
or bad?
to help him.
Bad.
He answered.
We are quite ruined. No. There's hope yet, Caroline. If he relents,
She said, amazed.
there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened. He is past relenting.
Said her husband.
He is dead.
She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so, with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart.
What the half-drunken woman whom I told of you last night said to me, when I tried to see him and obtained a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to be quite true. He was not only ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we are not, it would be bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor to a successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes, soften as they would, their hearts were lighter, their children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure.
Let me see some tenderness connected with the death.
Said Scrooge.
Or that dark chamber spirit which we left just now will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, and dwelling that they visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as statues in one corner, and sitting up looking at Peter, who had a book before him. Mothers and daughters were engaged in sewing. Surely they were very quiet. And he took the child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out, as he and the spirits crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and took her hand up to her face.
Oh God, I forgot. Oh, right, no. I know who she was. She was Old Bags.
The color hurts my eyes, she said. The color? Ah, poor Tiny Tim. They're better now again, said Cratchit's wife. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time.
I forgot the voice I gave this guy.
Pastor, rather.
Peter answered.
Oh, Peter answered, shutting up his book.
But I think he's walked a little slower than he used for the last few evenings, Mother.
They were very quiet again. At last she said in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, I've known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed.
And so have I,
cried Peter.
often.
And so have I, exclaimed another. So had all. But he was very light to carry, she resumed, intent on her work, and his father loved him so, and that it was no trouble. And there's your father at the door. She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob and his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. The two young Cratchits got up on his knees and laid each child a little cheek, pressing against his face as if they said, Don't mind the father, don't be grieved. Bob was very cheerful with them, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table, and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would have been done long before Sunday, he said.
Sunday? You went today then, Robert?
Said his wife.
Yes, my dear.
Returned Bob.
I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green the place is. But you'll see it often. I have promised him that I would walk him there on Sunday. My little child,
cried Bob.
my little child.
He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been further apart than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which he lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set loose beside the child, and there were signs of someone have been there lately. Poor Bob sat down on it, and when he thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom they'd scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, seeing what he looked, just a little down, said Bob, inquired what had meant happened to distress him.
On which,
Said Bob,
for he is the most pleasant-spoken gentleman you have ever heard, I told him,
I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit,
he said,
and heartily sorry for your good wife.
by the by, how I ever knew it, I do not know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Replied Bob.
Everybody knows that.
Said Peter.
Very well observed, my boy.
Cried Bob.
I hope they do.
Heartily sorry. Heartily sorry
He said,
for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way,
he said, giving me his card.
that's where I live. Pray, come to me.
No, it wasn't.
Cried Bob.
For the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as it was his kind way, that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim, and felt it with us.
I am sure he is a good soul,
said Mrs. Cratchit.
Said Mrs. Cratchit.
You would be sure of it, my dear,
Returned Bob.
if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be all that surprised. Mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried one of the girls, Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself,
Get along with you.
retorted Peter, grinning.
It's just as likely as not.
Said Bob.
One of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however, whenever we part from one another, I'm sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us.
Never, father, cried they all.
And I know,
Said Bob.
I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
No, father, never, they all cried again.
I am very happy.
Said little Bob.
I'm very happy.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed him. His daughters kissed him. The two young Cratchits kissed him. And Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God,
Spectre,
said Scrooge.
something informs me that a parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these later visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself, indeed. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end, just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment.
This court,
Said Scrooge.
through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. See the house, let me behold it, what I shall be in days to come.
The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere.
The house is yonder.
Scrooge exclaimed.
Why do you point away?
The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened himself to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same. The figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he'd gone, accompanied it until he reached an iron gate. He paused to look around before entering. A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name had now to learn lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun with grass and weeds. The growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repeated appetite. A worthy place. Hee hee hee. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced toward it trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape.
Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point,
said Scrooge,
answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be? Or are they shadows of things that may be only?
Still, the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends of which, if preserved in, they must lead.
Said Scrooge.
But courses may be departed from, the ends will change. Say this, thus is what you show me.
The spirit was as unmovable as ever. Scrooge crept toward it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, right upon the stone of the neglected grave, his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Am I the man who lay upon the bed?
He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him, and back again.
No, spirit. Oh, no, no.
The finger was still there.
Spirit,
He cried, tight clutching at his robe.
hear me. I'm not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been before this intercourse. Why do you show me this, if I'm past all hope?
For the first time, the hand appeared to shake.
Good spirit,
He pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it.
your nature intercedes me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change the shadows you show me by an altered life.
The kind hand trembled.
I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, in the present, in the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me, I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
His agony. He caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in its entreaty, and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate here reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
Oh. Zerp, are you satisfied with that interpretation of the ghost of Christmas future? If not, I owe you a rain check. I will take the smiley as a ringing approval. Oh, and now we are at this final stave, the end of it. Way to muscle through it, thank you. I'm like, when I get latched onto something, I'm like a pit bull. No matter how hard it is, I just don't let go of it. Alright, now I have to be Irish again. But first, water. Holy fuck. Oh my god. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own, and the room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future,
Scrooge repeated, as he scrambled out of bed.
the spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees.
He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears.
They're not torn down,
Cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed's curtains in his arms.
they're not torn down, rings and all. They're here, I'm here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be, I know they will.
His hands were busy with the garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties of every kind of extravagance.
I don't know what to do,
Cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect loud coon of himself with his stockings.
I'm as light as a feather, I'm as happy as an angel, I'm as merry as a schoolboy, I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Merry Christmas to everybody, Happy New Year to all the world. Hello here, whoop, hello.
He'd frisked into the sitting room, and was now standing there, perfectly winded.
There's the saucepan the girl was in,
Cried Scrooge, starting off again, and going round the fireplace.
There's the door which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right, it's all true, it all happened.
Really, for a man who'd been out of practice for so many years, 'twas a splendid laugh, most illustrious laugh, the father of a long line of brilliant laughs.
I don't know what day of the month it is,
Said Scrooge.
I don't know how long I've been among spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello. Whoop. Hello, here.
He was checked by his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he'd ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding dong, bell. Bell dong ding. Hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, fresh air, sweet, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious.
What's today?
Cried Scrooge, calling down to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. What? Returned the boy, with all his might of wonder.
What's today, my fine fellow?
Said Scrooge. Today?
Replied the boy.
Oh, fuck, replied the boy. Why, it's Christmas Day.
Hee hee hee. The ghost of Christmas future is back.
It's Christmas Day.
Said Scrooge to himself.
I've missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Course they can. Course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Returned the boy.
Do you know the poulterer's in the next street but one, at the corner?
Scrooge inquired.
I should hope I did.
Replied the lad.
Ah, intelligent boy.
Said Scrooge.
An remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
Returned the boy.
What a delightful boy.
Said Scrooge.
It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
Replied the boy.
It is,
Said Scrooge.
go and buy it.
Walker.
Exclaimed the boy.
No, no, said Scrooge. I'm in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here, so that I may just give him direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling.
Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger who could get him off at a shot so fast.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit,
Whispered Scrooge, opening his hands and splitting with a laugh.
he shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be.
The hand which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did somehow. He went downstairs to open the straight door ready for the coming of the poulterer's man, and he stood there, waiting his arrival, and the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it, as long as I live,
Cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand.
I certainly never looked at it before. What an honest expression it was in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's a turkey. Hello, whoop, how are you? Merry Christmas.
'Twas a turkey. He never should have stood upon legs, that bird. He would have snapped them short off in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax.
Why, it's impossible to carry that to Tandem Town,
Said Scrooge,
we must have a cab.
the chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, was only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even if you don't dance while you're at it. But he cut the end of the nose off. He would have put a piece of the stick and plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself up all the best, and at last got into the trees. The people by this time were pouring forth, as he'd seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking down with his hands behind him. Scrooge regarded every one of them with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humoured fellows said, "Good morning, sir, and Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge, often afterwards, said all the blithe sounds he'd ever heard, were the blithest in his ears. He'd not gotten far, when coming on toward him, he beheld the portly gentleman who'd walked into his counting house the day before, and said, "Oh, right, this was the New Yorker. Scrooge and Molly's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think the old man would look upon them when they met. He knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it.
My dear sir,
Said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both his hands.
how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. Merry Christmas to you, sir.
"Mr. Scrooge,"
Yes,
said Scrooge.
that is my name. I fear it might not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. Will you have the goodness here, Scrooge? And will you have the goodness?
Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Oh, Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?"
If you please,
said Scrooge.
not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me the favour?
"My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I do not know what to say to such munificence,"
Don't say anything, please.
retorted Scrooge.
Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
"I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it.
Thank you,
Said Scrooge.
I'm much obliged to you. Thank you 50 times. Bless you.
He went to church, walked about the streets, and watched people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses, and up the windows, and found everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Is your master home, my dear?
Said Scrooge to the girl. Nice girl, very.
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
Said Scrooge.
He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please.
Thank you. He knows me.
Said Scrooge, with his hand already on his dining room lock.
I'll go in here, my dear.
He turned gently, and sidled his face in, round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in a great array. These young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything's right.
Fred,
Said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how is an niece by marriage started? Scrooge had forgotten, for the moment, about her sitting in the corner with the fold stool, for he'd never done it on any account.
Why, bless my soul,
cried Fred.
Who's that? Who's that? Who is that?
There we go.
It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be hard here. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he's early there. If he could only been there first. And catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it, yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15, no Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with the door wide open, that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he was trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello,
growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could define it.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
Bob, what voice did I give Bob? Right,
I'm very sorry, sir,
said Bob.
I am behind my time. You are,
repeated Scrooge.
Yet I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please. It is only once a year, sir,
pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank.
It shall not be repeated. I am making rather merry yesterday, sir. Now I'll tell you what, my friend,
said Scrooge.
I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore,
he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again.
And therefore, I'm about to raise your salary.
Bob trembled, and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding it up and calling to the people in the court for help in a straight waistcoat.
A Merry Christmas, Bob,
said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back.
A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. A raise your salary, and endeavour to assist your struggling family. We will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I. Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die. He was the second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man. As good as Old City knew. Or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people heeded him, for he was wise enough to know that nothing had ever happened on the globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing that such these would be blind away. Anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He'd no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
Holy Jesus. We did it, chat. We read the entirety of A Christmas Carol on Christmas. Da 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 da. And my voice acting could have been worse. It could have been much worse. Oh man. Well, and Christmas Eve. Yeah. If you combine the two, depending on your time zone, no. Yeah. Technically. we will have more winter stories and the such on New Year's Eve, which also falls on a Friday. And until then, I have half a mind to give my poor pipes a break, and I don't think it can grudge me. But baby, it's cold outside and I got nobody to love. Do 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 do. No, but I hope you enjoyed it, Sassy. I tried to do it justice in my stupid way. I have a feeling it's a story kind of near and dear to you. And I'm proud that we did this. And should you ever need a little Christmas cheer, the VOD will always be there. And thank you guys for making it interactive and giving me like ideas for the voices. That was fun as hell. Aw, Lupine Huggle to you, Zerp. It was a blast. Like, I gotta tell you, streams lately between Nier, Mahjong, and the story streams, I'm having so much fun. I love the reading streams so much. And I just bought Inscription, so I'll probably be streaming that as well. But gods, it's so much fun. I actually have half a mind to, it's already 10:30, but I don't want to go to sleep. Fuck it. No, I'll be good. I'll stream tomorrow. Even though I want to keep going. My voice is going to die if I keep going. I know that. But I would be remiss to forget to say, for those of you who observe, Merry Christmas. To those of you who don't observe, Happy Dawn of Winter. May the cold treat you kindly. May you have as much snow as you can handle. And keep yourselves healthy. It's a scary world out there. And there's a burb fact. So, okay. Trying to think of a Christmas themed bird fact. Alright, so did you know that the American robin and the European robin are two completely different birds? Here, I'll actually show you. I'll give my poor laptop a rest. Da-da-da-da, cold outside and I got nobody to love. Do-do-do. So American robin looks like this dude. Really cute. They're like all over the place near my house yesterday and today. I think because all the people are on the vacation. These are males. They've got like a red head. Females have like a gray head. Which of course they don't show you because they're fucking mean. Ah, there we go. That's a better picture. They've got like a lighter head. So those are the American ones. These here. European robins look like these guys. And in European like folklore, they are thought to be like connected with Christ. They thought that like this little bird tried to help Christ while he was on the cross and got Christ's blood on his feathers And so the red, or really it's orange, the orange bit on his face and breast is from the blood of Christ. So that's cool. That it's just folklore, like it's just things that people tell, but I think it's pretty cool, and they look really funny from the front. They look like really angry bib wearing birds. But yeah, that is the burp fact. And yeah, if you guys have any other stories you want me to read, let me, just gather them before next week. But in the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Pokemon is returning coming January. Take care, guys. And seriously, thank you guys so much. And if you guys need any sort of cheering up or pick me up that I can do, I love making you guys smile and laugh and wonder what you're doing with your life. So don't be a stranger.
Goodbye! Merry Christmas!
Take care, guys.